Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another tutorial. 3 in 1 day, holy crap. Alright, so this tutorial is going to cover basic HKT or collision mesh making. So open up Blender, and here you can see that I have one of my catwalks. If I hide everything, you can see there it is in all its gloriousness inside Blender. So you don't export this model to Maya or XSI soft image. This is your pretty mesh, as I usually refer to it, and then you want to make something like this, a bunch of simple cubes that are really low polys to make up your collision mesh, for example. The important thing here is that you can't have concave shapes. You can only have convex shapes. So here you can see that I have 3 actual collision meshes here. They are separate objects. I don't know if you can see it very well. On the right side you can see that it cycles between them. Here's the east side one, here's the west side one, and here's the floor one over here. And when I back it up, you can see that they cover the handles for the rails for the catwalk, and then there's the floor one that covers the entire floor. You don't need it to be exact. Your player's collision mesh is really large, and the little gaps that you might say, hey, it would be really cool if I had this tiny gap here, the only reason you would do that is if you are very particular about having it, but it would get very complicated for some shapes depending on what you were trying to do. There is a limit to 5 collision meshes per block. There are other ways to get more, but I'm not 100% sure. As well as the modding collective, we've been trying to find out how to get more collision meshes. There's different types, but we're not sure how to access those yet. But for this tutorial, I'm doing the ones that we only have access to 5 of. So I'll select the rail, the floor, and the other rail. Now this is what I want to export to Maya. So I go to File, Export FBX. I select my SC export options as per usual, and I go to Catwalk Straight because that's what I want to export. I export it, and now I can go in here and I can see Catwalk Straight that it's been modified today at 9:25 p.m. and now I want to load up Maya and edit it in Maya. So first things first, File, Open Scene, that's what I do and it works. I go to Blender Saves, Space Engineers, and it's Interior, yeah, nope, yeah, okay, and then I look for SC Catwalk Straight, load that one up. I don't want to save changes because that's an empty scene. And now I have these 3 cubes here, each one's an individual. So I have 3 entirely separate meshes and objects, each with their own origin point. So there's a few things you need to do. On the right side, go and switch to the channel box layer editor, and you should come up with something that looks like this, where it says translate XYZ, rotate XYZ, and scale XYZ. Now, if you rotate this stuff here and make changes, it's not going to show up unless you freeze the transformations and those go to 0. So to make things easier on you, what I want you to do is you should see this bar right here that says general, curves, surfaces, etc. On the far right, you should see one that says Custom. Go ahead and click on that one, and you should have an empty bar here. You'll soon have this FT and CRB. So then I want you to go to Modify, and here you have Freeze Transformations. I want you to hold Control and Shift and left click or right click. Either one should make it pop up here, and then you should have FT here for Freeze Transformations, which will make all of these 0. Except for Scale. Scale you want to be 1. Next, I want you to add the CRB, which is from Havoc Content Tools up at the top right. And then you go down to Physics, and you go to Create Rigid Bodies, Control Shift, and then click it again, and then it should show up here as CRB. So usually what I do when I start, after I add the mesh to the area, is I click FT, which zeroes those out, and I click CRB, which adds this RB here for rigid bodies. You'd notice it's in the center of the block. So any way I look at it, the center, or origin, as some may call it, is where the RB needs to be. If it's in the center of this cube or the center of this cube, you're going to end up with a really wonky in-game collision mesh, and you don't want that. Alright, so the way you would tell if you would have your RB show up in the right spot is if you look in Blender and you see these tiny orange dots, that means that's the origin point. That's where you want the origin point to be. So if I select it, put my cursor over here, and then I went to here and set my origin point over here for some reason, it's going to mess up. It would import totally different into Maya after you froze the transformations. So as you can see, there's no more orange point there. It's right there. But the other two have the orange point where it needs to be. So I click Shift S, cursor to center, select the one that I need to fix the origin point for, set origin to 3D cursor, and now it's there. So that's how you get the RB where it needs to be. Alright, so the next step, after you've clicked the CRB, you've unselected everything because that's what it does. Now, the next step is something I usually have to do. There's been very few cases where I didn't have to. I have to rotate X by 90 degrees. So now it looks like my catwalk's sitting on its side. And then I have to freeze transformations again, so now it's 0. You need to do this to make sure that your object has its collision meshes in the right place. That's the whole going into the F11 menu in-game and showing the, what do they call them? Physics dummies or something like that. So you can see those in-game. So you'd place your catwalk, for example, and then you would load it up in-game and open up the physics primitives, and you'd see that your catwalk is sitting on the side or something. You might have missed this rotating it on the x-axis by 90 degrees. It isn't always the case. Sometimes it changes, and for some very specially shaped blocks, you need to make sure that you mirror your block to have the collision mesh kind of like the mirror version of it to have it show up right. There's very few cases where I've actually had this happen. The only one that I can recall offhand was Lone Assassin's Mass Effect thrusters. And one of his tables I had to do it for as well. It's usually when you have a very odd shaped collision mesh that's not a simple shape like a cube, or a sphere, or a capsule, or whatever, a triangle. Alright, so you're at this step, and you want to then export this as rigid bodies and get your HKT file that everybody's talking about. So you go to export, and to the little box to the right, click that, and it should bring up this menu. And what I want you to do is click selected only. So that means that you're only going to select these things. You're not going to export the world or anything like that. It's just these. So you can get pretty creative. Like if you work in Maya, you might be able to make a whole bunch of collision meshes in one, but you only select 5 of them that you want to export and go, okay, this is what I want. So you go ahead and click export, and it should bring up this new window here that says Havoc Content Tools Filter Manager. So to make things easier, you're able to save your configuration set. In the description of this video, what I'll do is, so changes have been made to the configuration without saving. Are you sure you want to continue? Click yes. I'm going to include my configuration set. There's nothing special about it. It's the same exact settings that are in the tutorial by the developers. It just makes things a lot easier when you're making 200 blocks and you don't want to re-add all this stuff. As you can see here, as with the developer preview that they have, X has 1 on the first slot, and then Z has 1 on the second slot, and then Y has 1 on the third slot. And then pretty much everything else is how it needs to be. The file name, I don't change it. It's exactly how I've had it ever since I set this up. The way it is here is, say my FBX is right there. When I click this run configuration and it goes through its thing and it says 0 errors, 0 warnings, and I go look in my folder, the HKT is going to be right there. It exports to the same folder as the FBX that you loaded. So if I went to my downloads folder and I had an FBX in there, I would build the HKT and it would show up in my downloads folder. If you did it on your desktop, it would show up on your desktop. You can change this if you want. It's entirely up to you. I like it this way because it makes things a lot easier on me, and it makes my process, my particular process, very straightforward, and I don't have to worry about anything messing up anywhere. So you've built your HKT, it's in the folder. You can go leave Maya up after you've built it. You can go ahead and close this window, but leave Maya up. I then want you to load up the game and check to see if your collision mesh is where it needs to be. If it's not, all I want you to do is come back into Maya with everything still here, and I want you to rotate one of them 90 degrees. And then I want you to freeze the transformations again, and then export the FBX again, or export the HKT again, rebuild the MWM, and then put it back into the game in your mods folder, and then load the game back up. And look, you can't do reload collision meshes in game to my knowledge yet. You can only reload textures, and I think you might be able to reload meshes now. But yeah, the HKT, the XML, and the FBX all have the same name. If I go to my desktop folder, and MWM generators, here you can see, let's go into large. So I have my SC 1x1 motor rotor. I have that as an FBX, an HKT, and an XML. So you just copy these 3 files and you put them into your MWM builder, generate the MWM, and then put these 3 files somewhere safe, just in case you have to rebuild them. Never delete these. I ended up accidentally deleting a whole bunch of them, and that was a terrible mistake. So just don't follow on my footsteps with that one. I think that pretty much covers it. The simple boxes for collision meshes. No concave shapes, only convex shapes. The lower the poly count on the collision mesh, the better. If you have this collision mesh, for example, and you got it all sorts of cut up, fix it so it's simple like this. Each face is only 2 polygons or 2 triangles. So this particular piece only has 12 tries, as all cubes should only have 12 tries. If I add more, it affects the performance of the game. Just by adding those 2 loop cuts, I've went from 12 tries to 32 tries. While it doesn't seem like a bad thing, it is in the long run if it's a block that's going to be placed a lot. You don't want something simple with a whole bunch of unnecessary things just because you think it looks cool to you when you're building it. Sure, you might like having the plus shape there, but nobody's going to notice it. It's not going to make any difference in the collision mesh, except it's going to hurt performance. So that pretty much covers everything. You got your 3 cubes, you export them as a regular FBX as if you were building the model. As you can see, all my settings are the same. I have my saved SE one. I'm still using FBX 6.1. I'm using the old MWM builder that I will include in the link of this video, or in the description of this video, so you can download that. It's also on the PSA video, because I like a streamlined process. I don't like having to open up a converter and go, hey, I need to convert this file to this type of FBX so this program can run it and then have this and that and whatnot. It just makes things complicated, and I don't like complicated when it should be simple. Alright, I'll catch you in the next video. As always, if you have a suggestion, let me know. I will make a video for it if I can't simply just explain it in a few words, or if a video tutorial for it would make it a lot easier for people to understand. I plan on having some more simple block difference tutorials coming up soon. I don't know when. Money's been really tight for me, which is why I've been trying to push for Patreon donations. They're better than PayPal because it gives me some sort of thing I can show to employers and going, hey, this is actually making me money. It might be pertinent for you to hire me because I can actually get you results or something like that. Anyways, catch you in the next video. Have a good one as usual.